running out of the ideas, and it's starting to be harder to write, and I'm trying to look at the different essays from other books, and some of them are really challenging to me. But I managed to write one of the essays, which is about conflict in class, which all of us can have. So what I'm supposed to be writing is how I handle the conflict in the class. So the CBEST essay starts with an introduction, with the following introduction. In an attempt to fulfill my science core without having to challenge myself, I enrolled in a class called the Physics of Music and Sound. I liked music. The catalog described the course in a way that had me envisioning a musical instrument of all kinds, and oddly enough a laser light show. As I soon found out, the physics of music and sound were not easy, nor were they fun to learn about. So basically, it's a common situation when you see real fun class in the college curricula, but it turns out it's not, as I assume. Even though for me, probably it wasn't an issue. I think my class in the college in which I had problems, it was real challenge too. It didn't sound like the physics of music and sound or anything like that. So, but anyway, let me tell you about my problem. For self-improvement purposes and in order to fulfill myself, I came across a class in college curriculum called concert band performance. I love music and I wanted to start playing musical instrument. According to the description of the catalog, I had to play any instrument with instructor coaching at the beginning until the final performance at the end of the course. As soon as the class started, I found myself as the only one student in the class, with me and my professor one-on-one, learning the tune for the final performance. I think it was really confusing. It was so confusing. So, I know it is kind of weird, but the professor was real good and she really took this, initiative to, to let us all work one-on-one with her. So basically it was real good coaching, supposed to be. So what is the best writing? Next paragraph. I was a creative writing major and veered away from anything remotely scientific. Having Dr. Ignis as a teacher didn't help the course. He was a brilliant man, the kind of genius who often showed up late in a stained shirt with his hair askew. His mind was simply operating at a level too high to be concerned with the minute of his daily appearance. Shortly after my class, he was recruited by a much better school to supervise some sort of research. He was also a terrible teacher. Well, I had different issue, but anyway. I was a theater major and get acquainted with the stage already. To the contrary, Dr. Smith wasn't an instructor who paid attention to your previous achievements. She was a warlike woman, an intelligent person who always looked perfect at her class with neat and modest suit and fine hair. Nevertheless, she had only few students in the class. She was somewhat jittery all the time, as she was more of Latin dance instructor other than music instructor. She always talked about her regrets, that she can teach better in the class, and desire to quit music and become a lawyer. Right, next paragraph. Some of the more analytic students were fine with this, but there were plenty of us who were not. One malcontent suggested we all talk to the dean. Instead, I decided to speak to the professor. I knew that we process things very differently. I wasn't sure we could even communicate. However, I suspected he would relate to my frustration at not being able to understand something, no matter how many angles I approached it from. Using that as my lead, I approached him. So, in my class, some of the students brought their fine instruments. Okay, so Dr. Smith was an excellent musician playing several musical instruments. At the beginning of the class, I was wondering if she has the performance outline and if I'm going to have my part. At first, she seemed to be nervous hearing this question, letting me know that she ought to have plenty, so that we ought to have plenty of time, and pointed at notes and scales for me to play. I still remember her sitting next to me and playing the tunes together at the piano. Until the end of the semester, we had no rehearsals, and no one knew what to do but had only music sheets to play the music for the final performance. So, what CBEST tells us to do? During our conversation, I learned that Dr. Ignis was attempting to write a textbook. We worked out a deal. For extra credit, I could provide feedback on each of the chapters as he wrote it. My point of view, it turned out, was exactly what he needed. I was his audience, and as he learned, he had no idea how to write for it. I told him that the more feedback he learned, the better off he would be in the end. As a result, he offered the same deal to other students in the class. Some students who, like me, signed up for the class as a way to meet a science score quickly jumped at the chance to avoid failing. In my class, some of the students brought their fine instruments which they had to buy for the class. I recalled students with electric guitars, keyboards, and I myself brought a saxophone. One of the students asked about the textbook and that not all the students were involved in the final performance. I remember that I did great with my saxophone solo and a short piano performance. It was a disappointment to see all the performance to be disorganized, even though we all had good grades at the end, and I still think that experience was, and that I still think that experience was humiliating. A few years later, I realized that I learned from class, playing scales in piano and fine-tuning a saxophone, and I made it to the final performance. But I wish I could have had better feedback with Dr. Smith. So, and what ending is in CBEST book is that during our conversation, I learned that Dr. Ignis was attempting to write a textbook. Okay, so I had this. As it turned out, physics was fun. I learned more about the nature of sound. Reviewing that book that I did from the semester that I paid for, I also learned that no matter how different two people are, a compromise can always be reached.